The emergency broadcast crackled through every communication device across the galaxy, from the bustling trade stations orbiting distant suns to the quiet farming colonies on the rim worlds. The same message played on repeat. The Galactic Trade Confederation had made their decision final. David. Reed wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of the grain storage facility on Haven 7. The twin suns were setting behind the purple mountains, painting the endless wheat fields in shades of gold and amber. This world had been home to humans for over 2 centuries. Now the message echoing from every speaker told them they had 6 months to leave. All human settlements beyond the Sol system are hereby ordered to evacuate immediately, the mechanical voice announced. The Galactic Trade Confederation has determined that human presence outside Earth's solar system poses an unacceptable risk to galactic stability and order. Reed's communication device buzzed with an incoming call from Admiral Lisa Chen aboard the military transport New Dawn. Her face appeared on the small screen, tired lines marking her features. Behind her, Reed could see the controlled chaos of a command center dealing with the impossible. David, we're coordinating evacuations across 43 worlds, Chen said without preamble. The Confederation is providing transport ships, but they're not exactly luxury vessels. How many people do you have on Havenspin? 2.3 million spread across the continent, Reed replied, looking out at the vast agricultural complex that stretched to the horizon. This place feeds 17 star systems. What happens to all of this when we're gone? Chen's expression hardened. That's not our problem anymore. Apparently, the Alterians have made it clear that human chaos and unpredictability are incompatible with their vision of galactic order. Pack light, David. Personal belongings only. The transmission ended, leaving Reed alone with the sound of machinery humming in the background. These machines had run continuously for decades, processing grain that would feed billions across multiple worlds. The humans had spent generations perfecting the balance between technology and nature on this world. Now it would all be abandoned. Commander Veltar of the Alterian Empire watched the evacuation proceedings from the bridge of his dreadnought. The massive ship hung in orbit above Haven 7, like a silver dagger pointed at the planet's heart. To him, the sight of human transport ships loading desperate families was deeply satisfying. Status report, Veltar commanded, his forearms folded behind his back, in the traditional Alterian posture of authority. 43 worlds in various stages of evacuation, Commander, his aide replied. The humans are complying with the timeline, though many are expressing concerns about the infrastructure they're leaving behind. Veltar's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. Let them be concerned. For too long, these mammals have spread their disorder across our orderly galaxy. Their unpredictable nature, their emotional decision-making, their tendency to interfere in matters that don't concern them. The galaxy will be better without their chaos. The aide hesitated before speaking again. Sir, some of our economic advisors have raised questions about the human evacuation. They maintain several critical trade routes and provide specialized services across multiple sectors. Easily replaced, Veltar dismissed with a wave of his primary arm. The hegemony coalition species are far more reliable. Order will prevail over chaos, as it always has. On Earth, President Williams addressed the emergency session of the United Nations. The massive assembly hall was packed beyond capacity, as representatives from every nation struggled to comprehend the logistics of what was about to happen. 12 billion humans were about to return to a world that had been carefully managing its population for centuries. The Confederation has given us 6 months to complete the largest forced migration in galactic history, Williams said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the crisis. We will not abandon our people. Every transport ship, every available vessel, every resource we have will be dedicated to bringing our citizens home. The Secretary of Space Colonies, Maria Santos, stood to address the assembly. Mr. President, the infrastructure requirements alone are staggering. Housing 12 billion additional people, feeding them, providing employment. Earth's resources are already stretched to their limits. Williams nodded grimly. We've been preparing for this possibility longer than most of you know. Protocol, Lazarus, has been in development for 50 years. We always knew this day might come. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Most of the representatives had never heard of Protocol Lazarus. It was a contingency plan so classified that only a handful of people in each administration had been briefed on its existence. What exactly is Protocol Lazarus? Santos asked. Survival, Williams replied simply. The details will become clear in the coming months. For now, focus on the evacuation. Bring our people home. Back on Haven 7, Reed supervised the loading of the last civilian transports. Families carried whatever possessions they could manage, leaving behind homes, businesses, and entire lives. Children cried as they were separated from pets that couldn't make the journey. Elderly colonists took final looks at the world they had helped build from nothing. The Confederation transport ships were utilitarian at best, designed for moving cargo, not people. They offered cramped quarters and minimal amenities. The alien crews were efficient but cold, treating the human evacuees like inventory to be processed and shipped. This is temporary housing, one of the Trilaxian transport officers told Reed as families were herded into conversion cargo holds. Your species will adapt. Reed watched a young girl clutch a toy as she followed her parents into the dim interior of the transport ship. The toy was a small replica of a Haven 7 grain harvester, something her father had probably made for her. Soon it would be all she had left of the only home she had ever known. The last transport lifted off, just as the sun set on Haven 7. Reed stood alone, in the empty control center of the agricultural complex, listening to the hum of machinery that would continue running until it eventually broke down. No one else knew how to maintain it. His personal communicator buzzed with a message from Admiral Chen. All human worlds report successful evacuation. We're coming home, David. Reed activated the facility's automated systems one final time, setting them to run as long as possible without human oversight. Then he walked to his own transport, the last human to leave Haven-7. As his ship broke orbit, Reed looked down at the world they were abandoning. The lights of the agricultural complexes still twinkled across the continents like scattered stars. The irrigation systems still flowed. The processing centers still hummed with activity, but without human hands to guide them. It was all running on borrowed time. Commander Veltar's voice echoed across all frequencies as the last human. Transports departed the Rim territories. The galaxy is now cleansed of human disorder. Peace and proper civilization shall reign. The age of chaos is over. The words rang with confidence and finality. The Confederation had achieved what they believed was their greatest victory. The unpredictable, chaotic humans were contained once again to their small corner of space. But as the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying 12 billion people back to Earth, none of the alien leaders considered what they might have lost. They saw only what they had gained: order, predictability, and control. The cost of that order would become clear soon enough. 3 weeks after the last human transport left Haven 7, Agricultural Supervisor Krex received his first crisis report. The Hegemony Coalition had assigned him to oversee food production on humanity's former farming worlds. Confident that maintaining crop yields would be a simple matter of following established procedures, Krex stared at the data streaming across his workstation in disbelief. Crop yields were dropping by 12% daily across all 7 major agricultural zones. The automated systems that had run flawlessly under human management were failing in ways that defied explanation. The biointegration protocols are rejecting our commands, his Trilaxian assistant reported, her blue skin taking on a worried purple tinge. The crop management system keeps requesting biometric confirmation from users that no longer exist. Krex tried to access the master agricultural database, only to find that most of the critical files were encrypted with something called human genetic variance keys. The humans hadn't just operated these systems, they had designed them to work, specifically with human biology, human neural patterns, human decision-making processes. Contact the Alterian Technical Support Division, Krex ordered. Tell them we need immediate assistance with agricultural system management. 2 days later, the response came back. No Alterian personnel have training in human bio-integrated agriculture. Recommend developing alternative food production methods. Meanwhile, on the mining world of Granite Ridge, Operations Director Vex faced an even more immediate crisis. The quantum extraction equipment that had been pulling rare metals from the planet's core for over a century had shut down completely. The massive drilling platforms sat silent, their human-designed neural interfaces dark and unresponsive. Vex had brought the best Alterian engineers in the sector to analyze the problem. They crawled through the machinery like insects, their scanning devices probing every circuit and component. After 2 weeks of intensive investigation, their conclusion was devastating. The extraction systems are calibrated to human brain patterns, the lead engineer reported. The quantum resonance fields require specific neural feedback that only human operators can provide. The technology is completely dependent on human consciousness interfacing with the quantum matrices. That's impossible, Vex replied, though his confidence was wavering. No species designs technology that only they can operate. Apparently, humans do. The entire system is locked to human biometric and neural signatures. Without human operators, the equipment is just very expensive. Sculpture. On the trade station orbiting Nexus Point, Administrator Mech was discovering that the human evacuation had created problems far beyond simple personnel shortages. The massive space station served as a hub for 17 major trade routes, processing millions of tons of cargo and facilitating commerce between dozens of species. But the traffic control systems were in chaos. Ships waited in holding patterns for days because the automated navigation systems couldn't handle the complex routing that human controllers had managed effortlessly. 3 cargo vessels had already collided in what should have been routine docking procedures. The humans weren't just managing traffic, Mech's chief of operations explained. They were actively predicting problems, adjusting routes in real time, and coordinating with dozens of different species, using methods that our computer systems can't replicate. Mech pulled up the station's efficiency reports from the past month. Cargo processing was down 40%. Ships were experiencing delays that rippled across the entire galactic trade network. The economic impact was already reaching into the trillions of credits. How did we not know the humans were doing all of this? Mech demanded. Because they made it look easy. They handled problems before they became crises. They maintained systems so well that we forgot they needed maintenance at all. Back on Earth, President Williams stood in the newly constructed Emergency Operations Center, deep beneath Geneva. The facility had been built as part of Protocol Lazarus, designed to coordinate humanity's response to exactly this scenario. Massive screens displayed data from across the galaxy, information gathered by human networks that the aliens didn't even know existed. Report on Confederation infrastructure status, Williams requested from his intelligence chief, Director Park. Systematic failures across all sectors, Mr. President. Agricultural output down 60% and falling. Mining operations in 7 systems have ceased entirely. Trade efficiency has dropped below sustainable levels for maintaining their current economic model. Williams nodded, unsurprised. Timeline for complete economic collapse. At current rates, 18 to 24 months before the Confederation faces resource shortages that threaten their core worlds. Sooner if the cascade failures accelerate. Admiral Chen entered the operations center, her uniform bearing new insignia that reflected humanity's changed circumstances. No longer part of any galactic military structure, She now commanded Earth's Independent Defense Forces. The evacuation is complete, Mr. President. 12 billion humans are back in Sol System, and our hidden installations are fully operational. Phase 2 of Protocol. Lazarus is ready for implementation. Williams turned to address the room full of analysts, military officers, and civilian administrators. For 50 years, we prepared for the possibility that the galaxy would reject us. We built redundant systems, established hidden research stations, and created contingency plans that would allow humanity to not just survive, but thrive independently. He activated a holographic display showing the galaxy with hundreds of points of light scattered beyond the traditional boundaries of explored space. These represent human installations in uncharted regions. While the Confederation was focused on removing us from known space, we were establishing ourselves in places they've never even considered habitable. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to leave. They had been preparing to start over, completely independent of galactic civilization. "What about the aliens who are reaching out to us?" Admiral Chen asked. "We're receiving communications from several dozen worlds, requesting immediate assistance." Williams's expression hardened. They made their choice. They wanted us gone, and we're gone. Let them solve their own problems. On Haven 7, the agricultural crisis was reaching critical levels. The automated systems that had seemed so reliable were failing in cascade patterns that no one could predict or prevent. Crops were dying in the fields, and the sophisticated irrigation networks were malfunctioning without human oversight. Supervisor Crix stood in the main control center, surrounded by equipment he couldn't understand and problems he couldn't solve. The irony wasn't lost on him that this facility had been designed by humans to be as automated and efficient as possible. They had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, creating systems so advanced that only their creators could maintain them. His communication device buzzed with another emergency report. The atmospheric processors on 3 marginal colonies were showing signs of instability. The waste management systems on 2 urban worlds were backing up. The navigation beacons on 6 major trade routes were going offline, one by one. Each crisis was a reminder of human involvement that the aliens had never noticed because it had worked so seamlessly. The humans had made themselves invisible by making themselves indispensable, and now their absence left gaps that couldn't be filled. Commander Veltar received his first crisis briefing for weeks after declaring victory over human chaos. As the reports poured in from across Alterian space, his confidence began to crack. Food shortages were projected within 6 months. Critical trade routes were becoming unreliable. Mining operations that had run for centuries were shutting down. "How did this happen?" Veltar demanded of his staff. "We planned for their departure. We accounted for their roles in our systems." His aide, looking distinctly uncomfortable, presented the analysis that had taken weeks to compile. "Sir, it appears that human involvement in our infrastructure was far more extensive than anyone realized. They weren't just employees or contractors. They were integral to the functioning of systems across dozens of worlds." "Then we'll adapt," Veltar declared, though his voice lacked its previous certainty. "The galaxy survived before humans arrived. It will survive after they leave." But even as he spoke the words, Veltar knew they weren't true. The galaxy hadn't just survived with human involvement. It had thrived, grown, and become dependent on human innovation, human work ethic, and human problem-solving abilities. The age of chaos, as he had called it, was ending. But what was replacing it looked less like order and more like collapse. The first complete system collapse happened on Verdant 3, a lush forest world that had been one of the Confederation's crown jewels. Environmental Coordinator Zill watched helplessly as 2 centuries of carefully balanced ecosystem management unraveled in a matter of days. The atmospheric processors were cycling incorrectly, pumping too much oxygen into the lower atmosphere while starving the upper regions. The biodiversity maintenance systems were releasing the wrong chemical markers, confusing the native wildlife, and disrupting migration patterns that had been stable for generations. The entire environmental network was managed by human ecologists, Zill's assistant explained, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. They didn't just monitor the systems, they made thousands of micro-adjustments daily based on seasonal changes, weather patterns, and biological cycles that our computers can't track. Zill accessed the environmental database, hoping to find the protocols the humans had used. Instead, he found terabytes of data that made no sense without the context of human intuition and experience. The humans had created a living partnership with the planet's ecosystem, something that couldn't be replicated by following written procedures. Within a week, native species were dying en masse. The carefully cultivated balance between imported and indigenous life forms was breaking down. Plants that had thrived for decades were withering, and the forest cities that millions of Confederation citizens called home were becoming uninhabitable. 3 star systems away, Trade Master Korin faced his own version of the same problem. The Nebula Corridor, one of the most profitable trade routes in the galaxy, had become a death trap. Without human rescue services patrolling the region, ships that encountered problems in the dangerous gas clouds were simply lost. "How many vessels this week?" Korin asked his operations chief. 7 confirmed losses, 12 more overdue and presumed destroyed. The insurance companies are threatening to cancel all policies for corridor transit. If that happens, we'll lose access to the entire Eastern Arm market. Korin studied the route maps, trying to understand how the humans had made such a dangerous passage seem routine. The answer wasn't in the charts or the navigation computers. It was in the human crews who had patrolled the corridor for generations, learning its moods and patterns through experience that couldn't be programmed or taught. "What about hiring Alterian rescue services?" Korin asked. "They tried, sir. Lost 2 ships in the first week. The Alterians say the corridor is too unpredictable for systematic rescue operations. They can't understand how the humans managed it for so long." Meanwhile, on New Montana, the ecological disaster was even more dramatic. The planet had been a marginal world when humans first arrived, barely capable of supporting large-scale settlement. Human terraforming experts had spent 2 centuries transforming it into a garden world that now supported 15 million Krell colonists. But the terraforming wasn't complete. It required constant maintenance and adjustment, work so routine that the Krell government had barely noticed the human contractors who performed it. Now, without human oversight, the planet was reverting to its original hostile state. The atmospheric composition was shifting daily. Temperature regulation systems were failing. The imported plant species that formed the foundation of the planet's new ecosystem were dying, and the soil chemistry was becoming toxic to most life forms. Colony Administrator Threk watched the environmental readings with growing horror. "How long before the planet becomes uninhabitable?" 6 months, maybe less, his science advisor replied. The terraforming was never fully stable. It required constant human intervention to maintain the biological and chemical balances. Without that, the planetary ecosystem is collapsing back to its pre-terraforming state. Threk activated his emergency communication system and sent a desperate message toward Earth. Like dozens of other administrators across the galaxy, he was learning that pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. In the asteroid belt beyond Pluto, David Reed sat in the command center of Mining Station Alpha 7, one of humanity's hidden installations. The facility had been built in secret over the past 30 years, designed to be completely self-sufficient and invisible to alien detection systems. Reed's communication console buzzed constantly with incoming messages from across the galaxy. Former colleagues, alien friends, and even government officials were reaching out with increasingly desperate pleas for help. "David, this is Agricultural Supervisor Krex on Haven 7. The crop yields have dropped 70% since you left. We need your expertise to save the harvest. Name your price. Read, this is Administrator Threk, on New Montana. Our entire colony is at risk. Please, we'll offer whatever terms you want, if you'll just send a terraforming team. David, it's trade. Master Corin, the Nebula Corridor is closed to commercial traffic. We're losing billions daily. Can you recommend human rescue services for hire? Reed listened to each message, then filed them without responding. Admiral Chen had been clear in her instructions. Humanity was done doing favors for the galaxy that had rejected them. Any interesting developments? Asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief scientist. She had been one of the lead architects of Protocol Lazarus, working for decades to prepare humanity for exactly this scenario. The usual, Reed replied. Desperate requests for help, offers of payment, threats, and promises. The galaxy is discovering that our chaos was actually quite useful. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of galactic commerce. Red indicators marked failing systems, disrupted trade routes, and economic collapse across multiple sectors. The cascade effects are accelerating, she observed. Each system failure creates problems for connected systems. It's going to get much worse before it stabilizes. If it stabilizes, Reed corrected. Some of these worlds might become completely uninhabitable without human intervention. President Williams received his daily briefing on galactic conditions from the Emergency Operations Center. The reports painted a picture of systematic collapse that was happening faster than even the most pessimistic projections had predicted. The Confederation is fragmenting, Director Park reported. Several junior species are openly questioning the decision to expel humanity. The Hegemony Coalition is experiencing internal conflicts over resource allocation. 3 major trade guilds have suspended operations indefinitely. Williams nodded, unsurprised, and the requests for assistance increasing exponentially. We're receiving hundreds of communications daily. Some are offering significant concessions for human expertise. A few are making threats. Our response remains the same, Williams declared. We were ordered to leave. We left. The galaxy wanted to function without human chaos. Let them try. Admiral Chen entered with updates on Protocol Lazarus Phase 2. The Outer Rim installations are ahead of schedule. Mr. President, we'll have functional colonies in 17 unexplored systems within the year. The resource extraction operations are exceeding all projections. Williams smiled grimly. While the Confederation struggles to maintain what they have, we're building something new, something they can't control or regulate. On Alterian Prime, Commander Veltar faced a crisis that threatened the very foundation of the Empire. The core worlds were experiencing infrastructure failures that his engineers couldn't explain or repair. Life support systems, transportation, networks, and industrial facilities were breaking down in patterns that defied analysis. Sir, we've discovered the source of the problems, his chief engineer reported with obvious reluctance. Human contractors and specialists have been maintaining critical systems throughout Alterian space for over a century. The work was so routine and reliable that we stopped tracking it in our records. Veltar's mandibles clicked in disbelief. You're telling me that humans were maintaining our core infrastructure? Not just maintaining, sir. Upgrading, optimizing, and preventing problems before they occurred. Our systems are failing because they were designed to work with human oversight, and that oversight no longer exists. The implications hit Veltar like a physical blow. The species he had dismissed as chaotic and primitive had been quietly keeping Alterian civilization running for generations. Their removal wasn't a victory. It was suicide. What do we need to do to fix this? Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. We need the humans back, sir, all of them, and we need them to want to help us. Veltar looked out at the great city of Alterian Prime, its soaring spires and gleaming towers representing millennia of imperial achievement. Now it was all at risk, because he had underestimated the small, chaotic mammals that he had been so eager to remove. The age of chaos was ending just as he had promised. But chaos, it turned out, had been the force holding everything together. Admiral Korth, of the Alterian battle fleet, gazed at Earth through the viewport of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Imperial Justice. 6 months had passed since the human evacuation, and the galaxy was burning. Not literally, but economically and socially. Entire systems were collapsing into chaos that made the old human disorder look like peaceful harmony. Send the transmission. Korth ordered his communications officer. The message went out on all frequencies. Broadcast directly to Earth's government. The Alterian Empire demands the immediate return of human technical personnel to restore critical infrastructure. Failure to comply will result in military action against Earth itself. The response came back within hours, not from Earth's government, but from President Williams himself. His image appeared on the flagship's main screen, projected from what appeared to be a simple office, rather than any kind of military command center. Admiral Korth, Williams said with calm courtesy, "I understand you're experiencing some difficulties maintaining the galactic order you fought so hard to establish. That's unfortunate, but it's no longer our concern." Korth's forearms tensed with barely controlled rage. "You will return human personnel to their previous positions immediately, or face the consequences. The Empire has the power to destroy your world." Williams smiled, and something in that expression made Korth deeply uncomfortable. "Admiral, you're welcome to try. But before you do, let me show you something." The transmission shifted to show a massive space installation that Korth didn't recognize. It was clearly human in design, but unlike anything in the official records. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a major space station, but built with technology that seemed decades ahead of anything the Confederation possessed. "This is Research Station Prometheus, one of 17 installations we've built in unexplored space over the past 30 years, Williams explained. "While you were focused on our chaos, we were preparing for our independence. We don't need your galaxy anymore, Admiral. The question is whether your galaxy can survive without us." The transmission ended, leaving Korth staring at a blank screen. His tactical officer was already running analysis on the installation they had just seen. "Sir, the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The defensive systems appear to be based on principles we don't understand. If they have 17 installations like this one, we can't touch them," Korth finished grimly. The humans hadn't just left. They had prepared for war. On the ocean world of Aquatsa, Prime Minister Nexus made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. The underwater cities that housed his people were failing without human marine engineers to maintain the delicate pressure systems and life support networks. "Send the message." Nexus ordered his aide. The communication reached Earth within days. "The Republic of Aquatica formally invites humanity to return as full partners in our government. We offer complete autonomy, profit sharing in all marine operations, and equal representation in our council. Please, our cities are dying without your expertise." Similar messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. The Merchant Republic of Vega Prime offered humans complete trading rights and citizenship. The mining consortium of Kepler's arm promised 50% ownership of all extraction operations. Even individual planets were making desperate offers for human assistance. But the most shocking development came from the smaller species that had been marginalized by the major powers of the Confederation. Ambassador Reth of the Freehold Systems arrived at Earth aboard a converted cargo vessel, carrying an offer that would reshape galactic politics. President Williams met with Reth in the same Geneva facility where humanity had first learned of their forced evacuation. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "Mr. President," Reth began, his translator rendering his chittering voice into perfect English. The freehold systems formally request alliance with humanity, not as subordinates or contractors, but as equal partners in a new galactic order. Williams studied the small, insect-like alien carefully. The freehold systems represented 47 minor worlds that had been treated as second-class members of the Confederation for centuries. "What makes you think we're interested in galactic politics anymore, Ambassador?" Williams asked. "Because you understand what we learned too late," Reth replied. "The Confederation isn't about order or stability. It's about the major species, maintaining control over everyone else. They removed you not because you were chaotic, but because you were showing the rest of us that we didn't have to accept their dominance." Williams leaned back in his chair, intrigued, despite himself. "Continue. Your species has a concept called pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You believe that anyone can succeed through hard work and innovation. The Confederation believes in fixed hierarchies where the strong rule the weak. Your very existence challenged their fundamental assumptions about how the galaxy should work." The meeting lasted for hours, with Reth explaining how humanity's presence had inspired dozens of minor species to push for better treatment and more representation. The human evacuation had removed not just human expertise, but human hope from the galactic community. Meanwhile, in the hidden installation beyond Pluto, David Reed was coordinating the most ambitious project in human history. Protocol Lazarus Phase 3 involved establishing human colonies in regions of space so dangerous or challenging that no other species had ever attempted settlement. "The Magellan Cloud surveys are complete," Dr. Kim reported. "We've identified 37 systems suitable for colonization. The environmental challenges are significant, but manageable with our new terraforming technology." Reed studied the star charts showing humanity's potential new empire. These worlds lay beyond the reach of any Confederation species, in regions where only human adaptability and ingenuity could create sustainable settlements. "What about the response to our independence declaration?" Reed asked. "Mixed, Admiral," Chen replied from her position at the tactical station. "Some species are trying to negotiate new partnerships. Others are making threats. A few are offering alliance terms that are actually reasonable. And the Confederation leadership, fracturing. The Hegemony Coalition is blaming the Alterian Empire for the crisis. The Alterians are blaming the Trade Guild for not predicting the economic consequences. Everyone is blaming everyone else for not understanding how dependent they were on human services." President Williams entered the command center with news that would accelerate everything. "I've just finished negotiations with the freehold systems. They're offering something that changes the entire equation." He activated the main display to show a map of the galaxy with territories marked in different colors. The freehold systems control choke point systems throughout the galactic rim, trade routes that bypass Confederation space entirely. With their partnership, we can establish our own commercial network that makes the old system irrelevant. The implications were staggering. Humanity wouldn't just survive independently of the Confederation. They would compete directly with it, offering better terms and more reliable service to species that had been marginalized by the old order. "Timeline for implementation?" Admiral Chen asked. 6 months for the basic infrastructure. 2 years for full independence from Confederation trade networks. 5 years to become the dominant commercial power in the galaxy. Back on Alterian Prime, Commander Veltar received reports that shattered the last of his confidence. The economic projections showed complete collapse within 18 months. Food shortages were already beginning on the core worlds. Critical. Systems were failing faster than they could be repaired, but the most devastating news came from his intelligence division, sir. "We've confirmed that over 60 minor species are in negotiations with humanity for alliance terms. They're calling it the Free Worlds Alliance, and it's offering everything the Confederation never provided: equal representation, shared profits, and protection from exploitation." Veltar realized that the Confederation hadn't just lost human expertise. They had lost the moral authority to govern a galaxy where species like humanity could offer a better alternative. "What are our options?" Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Negotiate, sir. Offer humanity terms for return that are so generous they can't refuse. Or watch the Confederation collapse and be replaced by something we can't control." The choice was no choice at all. The species that had been dismissed as chaotic and primitive were about to become the foundation of a new galactic order, one built on cooperation rather than domination. The age of chaos was indeed ending, but what was replacing it looked suspiciously like justice. 2 years after the forced exodus, the galaxy looked nothing like the orderly paradise that Commander Veltar had envisioned. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries now resembled obstacle courses, with delays and failures cascading through the economic network like dominoes falling in slow motion. Ambassador Wellix of the Trilaxian Commerce Guild stood in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's most prosperous trading hub. Nexus Station, which had processed more cargo than any other facility in known space, was now operating at 15% capacity. The sophisticated systems that humans had maintained were breaking down one by one, and no amount of Trilaxian engineering expertise could repair them. "Send another message to Earth," Wellix ordered his aide, though he knew it would be filed with all the others that had gone unanswered. "Sir, perhaps we should consider the alternative," his aide suggested. Carefully, Wellix knew what the alternative was. The Free Worlds Alliance had established competing trade stations throughout the Rim territories, offering services that made the old Confederation infrastructure look primitive by comparison. Dozens of species had already switched their commercial operations to human-managed facilities, and the economic benefits were impossible to ignore. In the Kepler sector, the transformation was even more dramatic. The new human colony of New Terra served as the heart of a trading network that connected 47 star systems through efficient, reliable routes that the Confederation had never imagined possible. Admiral Lisa Chen walked through the command center of New Terra's orbital station, watching displays that showed real-time commerce flowing through human-controlled space. The contrast with Confederation territory was striking. Where the old system struggled with delays and failures, the Free Worlds Alliance operated with an efficiency that seemed almost miraculous. Status report on colonial development, Chen requested from her operations chief. "Beyond all projections, Admiral, we have functional colonies in 23 systems that the Confederation considered uninhabitable. The environmental challenges that stopped other species are actually advantages for us. We're the only ones crazy enough to thrive in dangerous places." Chen smiled at the familiar description. Human chaos, as the aliens called it, turned out to be human adaptability. The species that couldn't understand how humans managed to work in hazardous environments had never grasped that danger was just another problem to solve. What about recruitment from Confederation species? Accelerating daily, we're receiving applications from engineers, scientists, and administrators who want to work in systems that actually function. The pay is better, the working conditions are more flexible, and they get to be part of something that's growing rather than collapsing. On Earth, President Williams received a visit that marked the end of an era. A formal Alterian delegation had requested an audience, arriving in ships that looked distinctly less impressive than they had 2 years earlier. The Empire's resources were stretched thin, maintaining failing infrastructure, and it showed in everything from their uniforms to their technology. Commander Veltar himself led the delegation, a fact that spoke volumes about how desperate the situation had become. The same officer who had boasted about cleansing the galaxy of human disorder now stood in the Geneva conference room like a supplicant seeking charity. "Mr. President," Veltar began, his translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in Alterian language. "The Empire comes to offer terms for renewed human participation in galactic civilization." William studied the alien commander with interest. "I'm listening," full membership in the Confederation, with voting rights equal to any founding species. Territorial autonomy for all human settlements. Shared governance of critical trade routes. Compensation for damages suffered during the evacuation. The terms were generous, far beyond anything the Confederation had ever offered to any species. They were also meaningless, Commander Veltar Williams replied calmly. 2 years ago, your empire ordered us to leave because we were too chaotic for your orderly galaxy. You said there would be peace and proper civilization without us. How's that working out? Veltar's mandibles clicked in the Alterian equivalent of nervous laughter. There have been unforeseen complications. Complications, Williams repeated. Is that what you call the collapse of 17 major trade routes? The failure of agricultural systems that once fed billions? The shutdown of mining operations that provided raw materials for half the galaxy? We underestimated the extent of human involvement in galactic infrastructure, Veltar admitted. Williams stood and walked to the window overlooking Lake Geneva. In the distance, he could see the construction platforms where humanity's newest generation of starships were being built. Vessels designed for exploration and settlement in regions too dangerous for conventional species to consider. Commander, you didn't underestimate our involvement. You underestimated our value. You saw chaos where there was actually innovation. You saw disorder where there was actually adaptation. You thought you could maintain galactic civilization without the people who had spent centuries building it. Veltar's translator was silent for a long moment, processing concepts that challenged fundamental Alterian assumptions. What would it take for humanity to reconsider? Williams turned back to face the alien delegation. Nothing, Commander. We're not reconsidering. We've moved on. But surely some accommodation can be reached. Some compromise that serves both our interests. You're thinking about this wrong, Williams explained patiently. You're still assuming that we want to be part of your galaxy. We don't. We've built something better. To prove his point, Williams activated a holographic display, showing the current state of both galactic regions. The Confederation territory was marked with red indicators showing failing systems, trade disruptions, and economic decline. The Free Worlds Alliance territory glowed with green indicators showing growth, stability, and expansion. While you've spent 2 years trying to maintain what you had, we've spent 2 years building what we wanted. We have colonies in regions you consider uninhabitable. We have trade partnerships with species you've ignored. We have technology you don't understand and can't replicate. David Reed entered the conference room at that moment, no longer the colonial administrator who had supervised grain harvests on Haven 7. His new title was Director of Galactic Development for the Free Worlds Alliance, and his responsibilities included overseeing human expansion into territories that the Confederation had never explored. Mr. President, Reed said, the latest reports from the frontier colonies. Williams accepted the data pad and scanned the information quickly. Commander Veltar, would you like to see what human chaos looks like when we're not constrained by your need for order? The holographic display shifted to show images from the newest human settlements. Cities built inside asteroids in regions too radioactive for most species. Underwater colonies on worlds with toxic atmospheres. Research stations operating inside the event horizons of phenomena that conventional science considered impossible to survive. These settlements exist because humans don't accept that something is impossible, Williams explained. We find ways to thrive in conditions that would kill other species. That's what you called chaos. We call it human nature. Veltar stared at the images with something approaching awe. How do you survive in such environments? The same way we survived being forced out of our homes, Reed answered. We adapt. We innovate. We refuse to accept limitations that other species consider absolute. Williams deactivated the display and returned his attention to the Alterian delegation. Commander, I want you to understand something clearly. We're not angry about the evacuation. In retrospect, you did us an enormous favor. A favor. You freed us from the need to maintain your failing systems. You released us from the obligation to work within your restrictive framework. You forced us to become independent, and independence has made us stronger than we ever were as part of your confederation. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Confederation could offer humanity membership, territory, and resources, but they couldn't offer what humanity had already achieved on its own, complete freedom to build the kind of civilization they wanted. As the Alterian delegation prepared to leave, Veltar made one final attempt. If humanity will not return, perhaps some arrangement for technical assistance could be negotiated. Commercial contracts for specific services. Williams smiled, and Veltar recognized the expression from their first meeting 2 years earlier. It was the smile of someone who held all the advantages in a negotiation. Commander, if individual human contractors choose to work in Confederation space, that's their decision. But they'll be working as citizens of the Free Worlds Alliance, under our laws and protection, and they'll be charging market rates for their services. The implications were clear. Human expertise would be available, but as an expensive import rather than an assumed resource. The species that had taken human services for granted would now pay premium prices for what they had once considered routine maintenance. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The Free Worlds Alliance had become the dominant economic power in the galaxy, not through conquest or coercion, but through offering better opportunities to species that had been marginalized by the old order. Children on New Terra learned about the evacuation in their history classes, studying it as the event that had liberated humanity from the constraints of galactic orthodoxy. When asked what they would say to the aliens who had forced their grandparents to leave, one young girl raised her hand with a response that would have made President Williams proud. "Thank you for setting us free." The age of chaos had indeed ended, but what had replaced it wasn't order. It was something far more valuable. The freedom to build a galaxy where human values of innovation, adaptability, and cooperation could flourish without constraint. The Confederation still existed, struggling to maintain what remained of their old systems. But they were no longer the dominant force in galactic affairs. That role now belonged to the species they had dismissed as too chaotic for civilized society. The cost of enforcing humanity's departure had been the collapse of everything the Confederation thought they were protecting. The benefit had been the birth of something entirely new, a galactic civilization built on human principles, rather than alien prejudices. In the end, both sides got exactly what they had asked for.